And we are live. Welcome everybody to Mamavation TV. My name is Leah, also known as Bookie Boo on Twitter, married to Mr. Bookie Boo, who you might have seen before, who's going to take me on an excursion this week and hasn't told me where we're going. It's our 10th anniversary, and I'm completely clueless as to where he's taking me. Okay, so we're going to have a great show tonight. We brought Tamara Rubin on with Lead Safe America. She's fantastic. She's basically the person that I go to for any and every question that ever has to do with lead. She knows everything about it. She has a she has a story to tell you. She has a nonprofit association. She also is doing a film right now as well. And so what I wanted her to do today was I really wanted her to talk to you about lead in general, because what I didn't know, and this is something that I had no idea about, is how prevalent lead was in our homes. It really, 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 really is in our homes. And not only that, lead can be very, 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 very dangerous to young children. And when I say dangerous, Tamara's going to tell you the story of what happened to her son, and you're going to get a good idea of how dangerous it actually is. And then she's going to tell you a little bit about the places that you want to check to make sure that lead isn't there, and finally things that you can do. And do we want to remove it? Do we not want to remove it? And then I'm going to tell you a little bit about my story, because Tamara was at my house the other day and found lead in my home, a lot of lead actually. So Tamara, welcome to the show, my dear. It's so awesome to have you. I wanted to thank you so much for coming on and educating us about this really, really, really super important topic. And first of all, I'd love for you to tell us a little bit about who you are. Tell us a little about your nonprofit association and the film, and why you started this up, and why you're a mom on a mission.
Okay, so I started the Lead Safe America Foundation in 2011. It's a 501c3 nonprofit for lead poisoning prevention, and we do three things. We provide emergency intervention and support to families whose kids have been poisoned, and then we provide outreach and education to protect children from being poisoned. And the third part is the most fun, is we do parent advocate support. So if there's another mama advocate who is working to help protect children from environmental toxicity, we help them in their advocacy work in any way we can. And the interesting thing is most of our supporters have been in kind. And so one of our big supporters is hosting.com. They donate all of our website, and they've given us unlimited dedicated servers to host as many websites as we want. So what we've been doing for a lot of mama advocates is hosting websites for them for free so that they can help protect other children. And so the way this all started for me was that in 2005, my children were poisoned. We hired a contractor to repaint the exterior of our house. It was a fancy home in a fancy neighborhood in Portland, Oregon, historic home. On the historic register, it even had a name. It was the Hedin House. And we hired a contractor that was redoing all the major mansions, and we thought, well, he's going to be the go-to guy. And he told us he was going to use lead-safe work practices, which meant he was going to do, we don't know what, but at the time we thought he was going to do things safely and make sure our children were safe. And he told us we could stay in the house while he was working on the exterior of our home. Well, what we learned later was that he lied, and he wasn't certified to do lead-safe work practices, didn't use lead-safe work practices, and it wasn't safe for us to stay home. And so what happened was our children were immediately acutely poisoned by inhaling the fumes because he used an open flame torch to prep the house for repainting. And in our case, our kids had acute lead poisoning, and that's really rare. It almost never happens. Acute lead poisoning looks like the flu with no fever, vomiting, diarrhea, sometimes constipation followed by diarrhea, headaches, all the flu symptoms without a fever. And so it's really, really rare. Mostly lead poisoning goes undetected. Children have no symptoms at all. That's the most common symptom, is no symptoms at all. And sometimes it's, vague symptoms that might go with other things like irritability or change in diet or inability to sleep through the night, different things like that that your doctor might dismiss. And the only way to detect lead poisoning is to get a blood lead test. There's no other way around it. So it's all very sad and depressing, but at the same time I've turned this into my life, so I try and have a little fun with it. And I have some props. One of the things I do is I have this little toy. This is a $40,000 X-ray fluorescence spectrometer that I use. It's been donated to my nonprofit. And again, like I said, a lot of the supporters have been donating in kind. So I was trained and certified in using this, and they donated this to me. And I've been going around the country doing testing parties where I take this in and I point it at an item, and it tells me how much lead, mercury, arsenic, you name it, is in whatever I'm pointing it at. And so I've been, then I post those on my Facebook page for the film. And so one of the things I did was I decided to make a film about this because this issue wasn't getting the attention that it deserved, and I thought the best way to reach moms like you and me, moms who have time to watch documentaries on Netflix late at night but don't necessarily focus on reading the paper or whatever.
You got me pinned. Why is that? I didn't know. Doesn't everybody watch documentaries at 10 o'clock a.m.?
So the best way to reach us was to make a documentary. So I made a documentary feature film, and we're in post-production. And to raise money for the film and also to create awareness, I do these testing parties at people's homes. And so I've got more props. We've been testing things at people's homes, and this you might recognize. Seems like everybody has one of these. Whoops, where am I? This is a vintage 1950s Pyrex bowl with the white glass and the red on the outside. And when I test something like this with my X-ray fluorescence spectrometer, it turns out that it has about 80,000 parts per million lead. And when I post something like this on Facebook, people go wild because they're like, I have that bowl. It was my grandmother's bowl. How dare you take it away from me and tell me it's poisonous? And so it's sad, but it's fun because it's kind of interesting to see people's reactions. I mean, some people, especially the Pyrex collectors, are very upset about things like this. Other people understand and realize that this dish was made before there was regulation on paint and coatings, before there was regulations like California Prop 65 on what kind of goods could be allowed into our household. And so, it has toxins, and there are easy ways to eliminate lead from your environment. Even if you live in a new construction home, you might have lead from your dishes and that sort of thing, and it's really easy to get rid of them and come up with safe solutions for your family.
So for those like decorative plates that you see at the store that say not meant to be eaten on, is that possibly because they have lead and arsenic in them, or?
99.9999% because they have lead. I mean, if you look at my Facebook page, one of the biggest things I have on there, things with lead, is the decorative plates. And the other problem is that current regulation doesn't require that plates are lead-free. There's nothing requiring dishes to be lead-free. The only requirement is Prop 65 labeling that either says it has lead, or it's been tested for lead, or they don't know if it has lead. And
why don't you explain to the audience what Prop 65 is, because that's California.
It's a California regulation that was designed to protect consumers from environmental toxicity, but as with any regulation, industry has found a way around it. So the biggest thing that bothers me, even though I'm a mother with 4 sons, 2 whom were lead poisoned, is the biggest thing that bothers me is the jewelry for little girls, because you buy jewelry for little girls and it's pretty and sparkly and probably safe because you bought it at a store that sold it for little girls, but the minute you buy something at, say, Kmart or Walmart or Claire's or any other store, including Leah Sophia or anything like that, if it has a warning on it that says this is not intended for children, that's all they are required to do. They're only required to say this is not intended for children. So you can buy this thing and intend to give it to your child, and it can even be like a sparkly pink unicorn that obviously is intended for children, but as long as they put a label on it that says this is not intended for children, then they're complying with the law and they're able to sell that leaded metal or leaded crystal item to someone's going to buy it for a child.
Now let's back up just for a second and explain to everybody why they should care about lead. I mean, what does lead actually do to children? What could possibly happen if their children were exposed to this?
Yeah, so the big problem is that lead causes permanent brain damage. And it sounds maybe bigger than it is, I mean, or maybe it doesn't, I don't know. But what I tell, there's like neurons that grow in the brain, right? And when there's lead, the neurons stop growing and stop branching out and just get killed. And so in order to repair that brain damage, you can't. Those neurons will never grow again, but you'll have to grow new neurons around the neurons that have died. And without very focused brain injury rehabilitation therapy, children with significant lead exposures have really diminished cognitive capacities as a result of their lead exposure. So these capacities vary depending on what area of their brain absorb the lead. And what happens is the lead is absorbed by the brain in the place of calcium because lead biomimics calcium. So if your child was exposed to lead and their brain was growing really fast, like my son Avi was 7 months old when he was poisoned, and his head was just, that's a point where their head's just really expanding really fast still. They're going to absorb more lead in the place of calcium, and so they're going to have more brain damage. And depending on what was developing cognitively at that time, then that will impact what their impairment's going to be. But the problem is, you won't know what that impairment's going to be until they hit school age. So Avi was poisoned at 7 months, and we didn't really get what his injury was until he turned 6 or 7 years old. Then we had a neuropsychological assessment, which we filmed for the movie, and it turned out that even though he has an overall IQ of 130, which is 1 point shy of Mensa, he can't read because he has a visual memory in the 4th percentile. So basically, he can't remember what a letter looks like from the moment he looks at a letter to the moment it processes the letter and has to try and put the letter together with another letter to make a word. He can't remember what that letter was and what it meant and what it sounded like. And so now that he's 9.5, he's just learning to read. He's below kindergarten level. That's just one.
And your older son has behavioral issues, didn't you say he was violent at times? And
both the two middle ones are the ones who are most poisoned, and AJ is now 12, and he has really significant issues that have been coming up in the last year or so. He's got severe sensory processing disorder, so he is really freaked out about anything that touches his skin, clothing, shoes, water, anything.
We actually have, this is sensory processing, or my son actually has the same thing, probably not to the extent that yours does, but it's very common with children with Aspergers as well, and autism.
Right, and Aspergers and autism are impacts of lead exposure as well. It all depends on what place in the brain was hit at the time of the exposure. And so Avi has all the symptoms on the autism spectrum, but doesn't technically have autism because he doesn't have the primary marker of not making eye contact. And then AJ and Avi both have violent behavior that's primarily because they don't have the impulse control. So you and I would think, oh man, I want to punch him, and then you'll stop yourself, but they don't stop themselves. They'll punch each other, more likely, more than just, little boys being angry. So it's definitely, it changes how you interact with your children and how they behave in the world and how people perceive you as a parent. And that's been kind of an interesting thing, because there's a great article that I just posted on my Facebook page and my site recently. A woman wrote about how she was almost arrested for having an autistic child, and people called the police because her child was having an autism moment in a public space. And do you take your kids grocery shopping? How do you go grocery shopping? These are things you can't do with a handful of autistic or Asperger's or sensory processing kids. You just can't go to the mall on a whim. You go to the mall. I took Avi to the mall, and I hadn't thought about it because I don't take him ever, because I know, but sometimes I have a lapse in judgment. And I took him to the mall when I was in Southern California, and he freaked out because of the smell and the sound, and he just started screaming at the top of his lungs. And it's just kind of things that you can't predict sometimes in terms of the behavioral impacts of lead exposure.
Yeah, I hear you with that one. I remember, when when my son was a lot younger, and we used to do mommy and me classes, and this was before we knew that he had Asperger's. He was that kid that wanted to love on all the other kids really hard, and he'd come up and be like, ah, and just like, give him these hugs. And the mothers, would just freak out over my son because, he was really rough with them, and they would say it violent, but he was never violent, but, so I was always the helicopter mom, protecting everybody from my own child, and that's the way it felt, and I remember this one group, they had this little circle time, right? And I'm part of the class. Well, they created the circle around and like left me and my son on the outside.
Oh,
and turned their backs to me. And then I tried to get in the circle, and they literally elbow to elbow so that we couldn't get in the circle. And it was just the most foul, obnoxious thing that I ever had, dealt with as a mom. And that day, I remember going home and just crying my eyes out because, of being treated like that. And then, of course, about a year later, we got, a doctor. He actually was diagnosed really early. He was diagnosed at 3.5, 4 years old, which is really, really unheard of. But we had a specialist up here that just deals with autistic children, and he said to me, he's like, we typically don't, diagnose them until they're 7. But I can tell you right now that your son has Asperger's, and I'll write a script for you right now so that you can get OT treatment like now, and then it'll really help. So we did that. But the neuron pathways, it's the same idea. You have to like train them to go back. But I didn't know that lead stopped them. I thought that at least with Asperger's, there's some kind of train around or train something, or maybe it's the other neurons replacing it and going around that you're talking about.
Yeah, you have
I
to
don't
grow.
really know.
Cognitive, behavioral therapies, occupational therapies, all these things help to regrow different pathways. That's the
And then
concept.
here's the other thing, Tamara. When they had the list of the top 10 snootiest cities in the United States, Westlake Village was number 2. That was where that whole like shoulder to shoulder thing happened. That was in the second snootiest city of the United States.
And so something, what you're saying is kind of interesting too, because obviously my thought is I wonder, to what degree your children had any lead exposure, and while you can't, the thing is this epidemic of all these learning impairments isn't just lead, but what they've done is they've studied the financial impact, and financially at least, when you look at all of the environmental toxins and the different impacts that are impacting our children. Basically, we're talking about BPA and mercury and lead and all this different stuff. They did an environmental impact study on what was causing the biggest impact, and they determined that the cost of environmental toxicity on all of our children is $76.6 billion annually, and that's just on children, and that's just the medical interventions. And of that $76.6 billion, $50.9 billion of that is lead. So lead is 2/3 of the economic impact of environmental toxicity on our children. So while it's still important to focus on all these other things, it's kind of interesting that we're being really dismissive of lead, especially when it's in our kitchens and we're eating out of it. And partly it's because of the industry influence on our government, on the CDC and the EPA and other agencies over the decades and the century since the lead industry has been active, more than a century, where even to the extent that lead industry representatives appointed advisory committee members to the CDC Advisory Committee for Lead Poisoning Prevention, and that's in my film. Yeah.
So tell everybody, tell us a little bit more about the film and where they can find it.
So right now we have a website, misledmovie.com, and you can watch the trailer there. The most exciting thing is that more than 850 people have donated something to make the film possible, and The Who has donated music, which is just so exciting. I've been talking to their people this week just to make sure we have all the paperwork in order. And they're letting us use the song Behind Blue Eyes, and that's in perpetuity. So it's like, yeah, that's pretty cool.
It is really cool.
And then also, we haven't done. We're in post-production. We're trying to get it finished and in theaters by December, and we haven't done the final narration. But Peter Coyote volunteered to do the narration. Should we choose to have a narrator? And then, a big highlight for me is that I interviewed Noam Chomsky for the film, and so. For me, that's really cool. A lot of the younger moms don't know who Noam Chomsky is, I understand, but go look him up.
You should tell everybody just in case.
Well, he's one of the original political dissenters, and probably people compare him to Socrates. They say he's the Socrates of our time in terms of his anti-establishment and anti-industry thinking and writing over decades. One of the original protesters of the Vietnam War is kind of the way I summarize it for people. But his so broad, his writings and his thinking. He's a professor at MIT as well, and he writes for Truth Out. I mean, Truth Out publishes his articles and reader-supported news, and a lot of the other kind of more aggressive, politically left folks publish his articles. So it's worth learning about if you don't know about Noam Chomsky. Anyway, and he's just a tiny part of the film. We needed someone to comment on the fact that this deception of industry hiding the truth and intentionally creating products that were poisonous has been going on for decades. And you deal with that a lot with the whole GMO thing, and
right.
It's everywhere. And I might even venture to say that it was with lead first, and it's still going on with lead. And because all these other causes have gotten so much passion behind them, with all these other moms just incredibly upset and making a difference and going out there and attacking McDonald's or whatever, actually because of that, in a way,
we brought down their market share, baby. We brought down their market share.
But all this attention is great, but it also helps to diminish the attention on lead. And I just, you wonder, they've done a really good job about drawing attention away from the toxicity of lead, even though we've known about it for thousands of years.
The interesting thing about that is, what I actually think is when I find, and at least for me, when I started diving into the food, that was my inroad, and then it opened up a whole new world of things to me, where I realized right away it wasn't just our food, it went into all these other things. So I started, once I was down that rabbit hole, I just kept looking and looking and looking, and I found that, I know a lot of moms that are very similar to me. They come in different routes, different areas that, things that grab their attention. I mean, I have an eating disorder, so food was my obvious one, so, and then, I learned about lead, I learned about personal care, I learned about BPA, I learned about, all these other issues, and then, water and air, and, I think this generation has really created a sense of awareness. I mean, for so many reasons. I think that when we're the generation that outnumbered men in college, that was us, right? So we outnumbered the men, at least at USC. I think girls were 52, 53%, and guys were like, way less than that. So, we outnumbered men in college, okay? And we all, the vast majority of us, have bachelor's degrees and master's degrees. We're highly educated women. We're used to researching things. We have more confidence in our researching ability, and that's what I think is so important. Then you couple that with the fact that there's the grand internet where you can find anything at your fingertips, right? All you have to do is find the right sources with that confidence that I can find this if I need to, because I had to write 50,000 research, theme papers on whatever. I know what I'm doing. You put that together in a mom who cares a lot about her kids, holy moly, it's the end of the industry experts. That's what I say. I say, it's the end of the industry experts, where this talking head that was a doctor would tell us what to do and what to think. Those days are over. We don't trust them anymore, because we understand they're getting paid to say what they're saying. Regardless of who they are, they're getting paid. So they're going to have a vested interest in that company as opposed to our best health. And so I think, moms, because they're confident, we have social media, we have the internet, we have, it's just that confidence, and we're looking and we're finding these things on our own. And because we're women, which by nature we're social creatures, we share with each other, because when we find some nugget of wisdom that we really think is awesome, we want to tell everybody about it. And of course we do. And then we share everything, and then everyone else goes back to read that. Or, they also know that moms trust other moms more than they trust doctors or any of those other people or celebrities. And so when people like you and me, Tamara, start talking, we're more dangerous, far more dangerous than if Kim Kardashian got on this thing.
Oh, but I would really like her to get involved, just because a lot of people are watching. It's interesting because this month I'm in Parents Magazine, and so I'm getting emails from people from all over the place. The film is mentioned in Parents, and the trailer is in the downloadable iPad version, and we're giving away free lead test kits. If you go to leadsafeamerica.org, you can get a free test kit to test the paint on your home. And so it's fun being in Parents, because it kind of exposes you to a really new range of people. And then also Facebook, you never know who you're going to meet. I love that, I'm Jewish and I have some really religious Christian friends on Facebook, and our religious differences don't have anything to do, they don't get in the way of our anti-lead and environmental toxicity crusade.
Right.
And that's really fun. And just another thing that occurred to me, I started out when I was 26 and I bought my first home. I was a historical renovation buff, and I bought a home and I found out there was asbestos in the ceiling, so I had the asbestos removed before I moved in. I was pregnant. I didn't consider myself an environmental activist at the time. I was just like, of course I'm going to remove the asbestos. Wouldn't anyone?
Right.
And then, at that time I was really focused on food. We didn't need any hydrogenated oil. We didn't need any corn syrup. These, I was, and no food color and no artificial flavors. And that was just really important to me. I don't know why or where I came up with that idea. This was a long time ago already, like almost 20 years ago. And so then when the lead thing happened, I was already an all organic food eating, natural, blah, 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 crunchy mama. I live in Portland, Oregon. I wear Birkenstocks. I post, I have chickens in my yard. You have chickens too, right?
I have chickens, yeah.
You saw the chickens? Yeah. I have 5.
You got me beat, girl. But you're outnumbered.
But so anyway, so I was already looking at food, and so when the lead issue came along, it was like, oh, wow, this is interesting. There's another component here. And then what I learned was how the lead stuff ties into the food issues, and how our environmental exposure to lead and mercury and arsenic and those other things actually helps to create some of the food sensitivities. And then again, there's also, the pesticide usage and things like that. Lead is often used in pesticides, and it's used in pesticides in food grown in Mexico, and it may be, it's in leaded gasoline. And if you have an organic farm that's on the side of a road, that organic farm might have lead in the soil, and the food that's being grown there might take up lead. And so you really have to ask your farmer, are you, have you done soil testing? Are you sure that you have lead-free soil? And have you tested the soil for arsenic and other things? There's all these other issues that come up in the realm of food now, but knowing what I know about lead, that weren't there before.
So where in the home do moms have to, check? And how would they check?
Well, so the most important thing to know is that it's generally pre-1978 homes, although homes built up until 1981 can have lead paint because they may have, it might have been on the shelves or in the basement or whatever, or someone might have borrowed from their neighbor, things happen. And then also, even though lead paint was outlawed for residential use in 1978, it was not outlawed for marine use and automobile use, and people could have gone down to the boat store to buy some marine paint to paint the porch because they knew it was going to get a lot of weather. So even in newer construction homes, I'm finding building components like porches that have high lead paint. So you're going to find lead on porches, exteriors, trim. Mostly the biggest place is windows, the most dangerous places, because the windows you're opening and closing them, and that abraded surface rubbing against, the inside of the window, rubbing against the window trough, causes lead dust to be created from the lead paint that's in there. And even in the case of our house, was built in 1905 and had no paint on the inside whatsoever. It was pre-paint. It was all done in stain. And the only paint that was in the house inside or coming towards the inside was they painted all the interior window troughs with lead. Intentionally. Like, that was the only place, and it's the most dangerous place. So window troughs, baseboards, doors, and trim are your places to look. And it's really easy to replace a door, especially an interior door, get new, and it's easier almost than trying to fix it. Because if you are going to dip strip a door and then dip strip the hinges, and then the door gets contorted and out of sync with the alignment of the door jamb, then you have to, replane it and have to be really careful and do that off-site. So in a lot of cases, it's easier to replace that with a new door and actually less expensive than, trying to make the old door work and get it lead-free, because then the lead paint will have absorbed into the wood grains as well, so you can't sand that old lead door even after you've dip-stripped it, for example. It can still have lead. And so the way you test for it is, there's a few ways. I have free lead test kits from 3M. They're donated. Wait, props. Hold on. So these are what I give away. They are they sell for between $8.95 and $14.95 in hardware stores, and I think I have about $200,000 of them here in my office right now, in the pile over there.
That's
and
awesome.
and so there's two sticks in a kit, and each stick has in it, I'll show you right here, has a little bit of liquid and powder, and you put it back in and you crush it and you shake it and you squeeze out some yellow liquid onto the painted surface and rub it, and if it turns pink, then it's lead. And then another thing, once you use that, and even before you use that, if you want to have a full hazard assessment, you can hire professionals. I'm working on posting listings on my site on letsafeamerica.org, but the EPA has listings and local government agencies have listings of certified hazard assessors and risk assessors, and they can come do an inspection of your home. And I recommend those inspections be done like when you're buying your home, or if you're renting, if you ask the landlord if they've done an inspection and if they can show you the report, because different states have different laws, but hopefully there's an inspection that the landlord's done, and if they haven't, you really don't want to move into an older rental that hasn't had a lead inspection. And then on buying a home, you'll get a report, and it'll tell you what you need to do and how much the remediation will cost, so that can help you decide if you can afford the home and afford to stay there lead safe with your kids.
So Tamara came to my house. It was like, what, a year ago? It was about a year ago? Maybe a little over a year
not
ago.
that long ago. Maybe, yeah. Almost.
Actually, I think it was over a year ago.
Maybe.
Dear Lord. It was it before? It was before I started planning ShiftCon, actually. So that was well over a year ago.
Yeah.
So she comes over my house. I've seen the documentary, by the way. It's fantastic. So I can't wait for you guys to be able to see it. And she brought over her handy dandy $40,000 lead testing gun. Pick it up just so that the people at home can see that one more time. So she started testing things in my home, of course with my permission, because I was very curious. So we actually had lead in a lot of it. There was lead in the, okay, what do I put it? It's the windowsill of my door. What is that called? That little area?
you had leaded glass. You had lead lines in the leaded glass of your, you had an actual leaded glass window. And the interesting thing is your door is newer. It's from like the 80s or something, 90s.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And so, now, if you bought a leaded glass window or door, they encase the lead in two other panes of glass. But you had it happen whenever your door was made was right before they started doing that, and the lead lines were actually tactile.
Rubbed. It was rubbed off. You could see that some of the lead had come off, and that was the one that really killed me. Of course, there was other things that she found, that porcelain cups and plates and stuff like that, and that was a given. Lots of porcelain. But what really got me was my kitchen. All of my kitchen tile were made of lead, and it was old. It's like Mexican tile. And so I looked at Tamara and I'm like, what do I do? I mean, and I was absolutely floored, because prior to you coming to my house, I don't even know if you know about this, but about maybe 6 to 8 months before you came over, there was a water filtration company that got a hold of me, and they wanted me to be their spokesperson. Well, I couldn't get their damn filtration system underneath my sink, because my sink is like this old sink, right? I think it was original to the house. It was probably, I think this house was built in the 70s or something like that. No, maybe the 60s. I don't know. So the sink was really weird. So you had to literally get a new sink. So we were talking to this company. They were going to replace my sink. And then I'm like, well, there's these end caps on my sink. So if you replace the sink, you got to replace the tile, because you're going to ruin the end caps. And this is old tile. You got to replace it. So we were going back and forth, back and forth. And so at the end of the day, it was just so aggravating, because it was like all the stuff that was going to be, have to change. So we were going to remodel. And of course, if it was me, I was going to do it on the cheap, and I'd probably have someone come in and bang it down. We probably have the guy across the street do it, and everything fell through. Thank God it fell through, right, Tamara? Because they're completely made of lead. So tell me the scenario that would have happened had I decided to remodel my kitchen on the cheap using the guy from next door.
Well, the problem is, so when you break up those tiles, you're creating lead dust, and it just takes a microscopic amount of lead dust to poison a child. A good analogy is a sugar packet. A sugar packet worth of lead dust is enough to poison an entire football field. It's actually, depending on what calculation, it's either 1 or 2 sugar packets. But the current standard, the federal standard, is 40 micrograms per square foot is considered poisonous to a child. And 2 sugar packets of lead dust spread evenly across a football field would be enough to poison a child by that standard. And the new standard is 10 micrograms that's being recommended. And so if it takes that little dust to poison a child, imagine the dust created from breaking up your tiles and how quickly that would have gotten all over your house. And you really don't think about, oh, it's just construction dust, you wipe things down. Well, because of the construction dust at our house, when our kids were poisoned, we ended up having to spend over $200,000 cleaning up the mess, including throwing out all of our furniture, like our $10,000 mattress and all sorts of other things that were contaminated, and we weren't able to replace afterwards because we couldn't afford to. It's not the kind of stuff insurance covers. And the other piece of that is that often insurance specifically excludes lead-related issues that come up in terms of cleanup with construction or other problems. So what what you need to do in
those sneaky little bastards.
Yeah, that's a big problem, is the lead exclusions in the insurance. And I think, a really great place to tackle a lot of this, even the food stuff, would be getting the insurance industry on board. Because if the insurance industry was on board about the toxicity of these things, they wouldn't let Monsanto do what they're doing because of the insurance implications, and the same with the lead industry, and the same with all these other industries. And that's too bad that they're not. Maybe that's something we can work on. But anyway, so you would need to hire an EPA RRP certified contractor to renovate your home, and you would need to seal off your entire kitchen area and maybe do a plastic wall to the back door so people only come in and out the back door, and contractors don't go anywhere near the rest of the house. I would have you move out of the house while you're working on it. I wouldn't want your kids anywhere near that. And I would move all your furniture into the back bedrooms and seal off the back bedroom door so it's completely closed with plastic. So if there was some sort of spillage of dust because their seals didn't work, then everything would be, again, double protected in some other room. And then after the work is done, you have the house thoroughly cleaned, either by an abatement cleaner or using really good cleaning techniques, using wet wipes and HEPA-Vax and that sort of thing. And then you have a clearance test by an independent person. Again, that's between $200 and $400, probably more where you live. But
well, you'll just have to come to my house.
Yeah.
If you're done.
Well, what I want to do,
I know you, and you're the best. So why would I go to another person?
Well, the thing is,
fly your ass out here.
It doesn't test dust levels. It can, but it depends on how high the levels are. The level that this gets down to is really fine in parts per million, but the micrograms per square foot, 40 micrograms in a square foot, is way below the parts per million detection limit of an instrument like this. You really need to do dust wipe samples, and so you get a clearance test before moving back in. But what I want to do is I want to come to LA, and I want to go to communities all over the country and do these testing parties. And so because we're a nonprofit and we're very, very low budget, we've created a couple of Indiegogo campaigns, and we're going to create more. We have one up for LA and one up for Texas, and I think we put one up for Dallas. And the idea would be, if enough people sponsor me to come do testing parties, either private parties or public events, then I can come to people's towns and do a bunch of these testing parties. And they're a lot of fun. You'll see on my Facebook page, like, oh my, I didn't bring it in, it's in the car. I tested yesterday the mixer blade for a KitchenAid mixer. Did you see that?
No, I didn't.
It's a brand new KitchenAid mixer. It's the new bare metal version of their cookie blade. The blender, the stove, countertop one, not the dough hook, but the cookie blade. And it was like 460 parts per million lead. And the mom gave it to me because every time she made cookies, this black metal would come off into her dough.
Oh my God.
So this is now the next letter I have to write to KitchenAid.
Oh my God.
So when I go to these parties, people are finding things that are toxic and being able to throw them out. And now my whole office, I don't know if you can really see here, but this is all Tupperware not Tupperware, Pyrex that's been donated to me. And Corel, this, I don't know how much this was. There was a lot of lead in this little teacup, and this is the good one is the Mardi Gras beads. They're all very high lead, and finding these things and giving people replacement choices that they can still have necklaces, for example, for their kids, just not poisonous ones.
Do they have beads that are not made of lead for Mardi Gras? Have you
They
found
do.
any?
And I think I posted on Facebook about this too. The one place they have them is Disneyland because
Disneyland.
Disneyland got in trouble for some lead issues, if you may recall a few years back. There's lead paint in their exhibits, and they said, well, we're not a children's play area because children don't come and play there for 6 hours at a time. So they claimed exemption from the lead paint regulations that require children's play areas to be free of lead paint hazards.
I don't think Disney can claim child-free anything. I mean, yeah, like ridiculous, right?
Well, there's a specific regulation. You have to be going 6 hours a week to one particular place. I think it's 6 hours a week. It varies. Anyway, don't quote me on that. But you have to be going, sometimes it's 3 hours a day for at least 3 days a week. Sometimes it's 6 hours a month. And so they figured they were exempt because no one of their spaces had kids hanging out in it for that amount of time. But anyway, so as a result of that probably and some other issues they had with some recalls on some toys, the Disney Mardi Gras beads are lead-free.
Woohoo! Those are probably made. This is probably a special vendor they got somewhere. So, but then if I go to Mardi Gras, I'm totally screwed.
Yeah, if you go to Mardi Gras, you're screwed. I actually have a bag that they threw off the floats at Mardi Gras. You know, we caught all these bags. We filmed in New Orleans. We filmed about 40% of the film in New Orleans actually, and we got one of these bags, and the bag says not intended for children on it. Wait, hold on. I'm going to go get it. 1 second.
Yeah. Not intended for children. This just floors me sometimes. I mean, they really should tell us. They really, really should tell us.
Well, and so I have this huge collection of leaded shit here in my office, and it's really crazy. But this is one of my prize items because we got this bag, and you can see it. I don't know if you can see it clearly, but it says on it, it says metallic purple, green, and gold, 20 dozen, warning, not intended for use by children 12 years and younger, made in China. So this is the bag that the Mardi Gras beads come in when they're shipped to the people that are going to be throwing them. And it was really funny that they threw this off the float when I was standing there. Like, oh, this is interesting. Oh, look, there's that not intended for children under 12 warning.
Wow.
You know?
Right. Absolutely.
Anyway.
So what are the most like oddest things that you've found that contain lead?
Well, let me look around here for a minute. I've got quite a collection.
She's got the house of lead.
I do. I actually have. I'm surrounded by shit with lead right here. I'm gonna grab another thing.
I love her cork board, by the way. I need to get a cork board, but she's like right next to the wall. I'd have to move all my trademarks, right?
Oh, crash.
She just breaks something.
It's covered in lead. So again, this is one of the Pyrex things. Whoa. The white flowers on the outside of this Pyrex dish were 110,000 parts per million lead.
Wow.
So that one got a lot of crazy activity.
That's in my mom's cabinet right now.
You got that in your cabinet?
My mom's cabinet, yeah, she's got a whole set of those.
This is a new bunt pan from Target.
Oh my gosh.
8,000 parts per million lead. And it probably came with a Prop 65 warning, and it probably doesn't leach. So, you know, Jennifer Taggart's on my board of directors, and she's awesome, and she says, Tamara, you know, you got to be careful what you say. And the main thing is, yes, this probably was tested now and probably doesn't leach now. But how do you know it's not going to start leaching in 5 years, in 10 years? You don't. And when you see pottery that's cracked and crazing and has started, you know, deteriorating after heavy microwave usage or whatever, you know, you don't know. The consumer protection stuff only protects you at the moment it was sold.
Wow.
So, you know, for whatever standards it met the moment it was sold before it was ever used. And then this other one, this is one of my favorite ones I share with people. I made this with my kids. It's a paint-it-yourself pottery thing. The lady said, this is lead-free glaze. And I ate off this during my entire pregnancy with Charlie. And I had a matching mug that I made with my kids. Because after my kids were poisoned, I said, I'm not buying them any toys. Because right after they were poisoned, there was the Thomas the Tank Engine recall. And we had only Thomas the Tank Engine. So we threw out all our toys, got Legos. Legos are lead-free, generally. Anyway, and then we did the paint-it-yourself pottery. Well, after I got my XRF, I tested this. and it was over 80,000 parts per million lead.
Whoa.
Yeah, and not only that, but it was leaching, and and I would like
how can you tell when it's leaching? Is it just because it's the stuff's coming off of it, or?
Well, you can tell with the swab kits. I just did this right now. I don't know if you can see
if it reds, right?
This is from my plate just now.
Wow.
Oh my gosh.
Paint. And that's just from sitting on the shelf and not doing anything. I should probably wash my hands. So the paint it yourself pottery is distressing, because even though the owner of the store said it was lead free, it turned out it wasn't.
Wow.
How do you know as a consumer whether or not to trust that person?
And I'm wondering if she even know. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I wonder if someone sold it to her as lead-free, and she's paying a premium for lead-free glaze, and then she's turning around and selling it to everyone else.
Yeah, I don't know that she knew at all, and she turned out was dying of cancer. And, yeah, I can be dramatic about that, but she was firing leaded glaze in an enclosed small store every day for years, and then got a rare form of bone cancer. You gotta say there's probably a link.
Right.
I talked to a pediatric oncologist yesterday at a testing party, actually, and I said, this is a big problem, because the American Cancer Society specifically says, there isn't a known link between cancer and lead exposure, but lead exposure definitely causes immune system deficiencies. Cancer is an opportunistic disease that takes over when there's an immune system compromised. So 2 + 2 = 4. It's just who has suppressed that study linking lead exposure and cancer in a really big way? Probably the lead industry. Just guessing.
So the lead industry, how big are they, and where do they put most of their products?
They're growing. They reported record industry growth recently, if you look up the Lead Industries Association. And right now, the biggest product is batteries, car batteries, because pretty much every car battery has lead. And, there are other uses. Basically, after World War I, and then also after World War II, they were making lead for bullets and ammunition, but they needed then to come up with a way to create lead products that were non-recyclable, so that they could continue to sell it and not have it come back, and continue to make the profits from mining it, and having the integrated industry where they're going from mining to product creation, and they generate really increased profits that way. So that's where they came up with really pushing lead paint, because you can't recycle lead paint. It's applied and then reapplied and then reapplied, and so the profits continue. And so that's why the batteries are kind of a bad thing for them, but we keep consuming more and more cars, so
right.
That market's growing in spite of itself. And we're still finding lead all over the place,
So I wanted to remind everybody of our great giveaway. Our giveaway tonight is Lead Safe Kit for your home. It's valued at over $200. And I'm going to do the secret word. So you guys need to know what the secret word is to be able to win. And the secret word is Pyrex.
All right, and I'll show the things. Okay.
Go for it.
So you're going to get a stack of the lead test kits for you to use in your home. And then you're going to get, this is from EIT Supply, one of our sponsors. It's a certified test kit 5-pack for testing paint, dust, and soil. And so
how much are those?
How much are these?
Yeah.
I think they're about $70. I'm not 100% sure this 5-pack, but they range. They have test kits ranging from $39 to $70, around that. And then another one of our sponsors is Green Toys. Like I said, everybody gives us in-kind stuff, right? So we've got a lead-free race car and a lead-free recycled Frisbee. Yeah. And then we'll also include in this is a lead-out paint stripper. So it's a stripper made from soy base that actually detoxes and contains the lead dust as you're stripping. If you have a little stripping project, it's a small container of that. And then the final thing, and I can only send this if you win and you're not in California, because California doesn't have approval yet on these. This is a really new product. It's Toxiscreen. It's a saliva lead test, so you can test yourself or your baby for lead without doing a needle prick.
Why can't we do it in California?
I'm working. I mean, they're working on that, and they're going to tell me soon. They're working on getting approval.
I have to. Okay, I need to meet you at like a conference in another state, right? And then you could test my saliva, and I'll bring the baby.
Yeah.
Just meet you somewhere else.
And so that's pretty much everything. But there's testing stuff, and then you can test yourself, test your house, test your paint, test your soil, and then you can strip your paint and then play with some green toys there.
That is a party right there.
And then the interesting thing about the saliva testing is brand new technology. You can get a lead test at the doctor's office, a blood lead test, and I encourage people to do that. The finger stick tests are actually more traumatic for children sometimes. If you only have access to getting a finger stick test, get one. But because your finger is out in front of your body, children respond to it like they understand what's going on a little more and they know they're being hurt. Whereas the pit of your elbow, for a venous draw, they don't know what's going on. They don't have a relationship with their elbow pit. And so when you're getting a venous draw, it's almost less traumatic sometimes than a finger stick. So if you can get a venous draw, I recommend getting a venous draw for your blood lead level, and if not, a finger stick. And then these home kits for saliva are just coming out, and they cost about $70 each.
Oh, well, I did just get pricked. And I was, just recently. Yeah, I got fully worked up by the doctor. They took more blood than I thought I had to test me for all kinds of stuff. Part of the tests were just to see if I was going through early menopause, because my mom's an RN, and so I was looking at her, this is all the stuff she ordered. It looks really thorough. My mom's like, she's checking you for early menopause, among a bunch of other things.
Usually when they do a comprehensive blood draw, they don't include lead, so double check.
She did.
No.
Lead. They did the little prick thing.
Okay.
And they told me right away. They can tell you right away. I think it was like, she told me like right there. No lead.
Less than 3.3 is the reading on the finger stick. Yeah.
I think I definitely was exposed to lead. I did the dumbest thing. I was years and years and years ago, I was doing this volunteer work at a church that I used to go to, and there were these old pews, and I came up with the grand idea of these really ugly pews, and they need a new paint. They need a new paint job. So we need to strip them down and paint them and yada, yada, yada. Well, instead of stripping them down, because it was such thick paint, I torched them and then pushed it off.
There you go. And that can impact your babies.
Yeah, well, I'm thinking, this was like 10 years before I had children, okay, but was it 10 years?
They're showing an impact on genetic transference.
Yeah, so it's like epigenetics kind of stuff. So, but I swear to God that my memory that year took a nosedive. Like, I just couldn't remember things. And today, I still have issues like with memory. I mean, people know me. They know I write everything down. I write things. I write things down. I color code them, and I put everything on my iPhone. If I lost my little, books with my notes in it, I would be totally screwed because I can't remember anything. And my memory, even though I'm like your son, I have super high intelligence levels, but my memory is actually a little below normal. So I have to do all this stuff to keep up with, myself.
And it can be from a single incident exposure like that. It's kind of interesting. I had a similar experience, and I grew up near Boston, and we were high school students in the English history class. I think I was 15, and we got to go into the historic Boston homes. We were prepping these homes built in the 1600s because they were turning them into museums. And so we got to strip the banisters and remove all the layers of wallpaper, and oh, what a treat. And we had to document everything that we were doing because it was historic preservation, and this is what turned me on to historic preservation. This is why I ended up poisoning my kids, because I wanted to preserve my historic home and restore the original siding. I thought that was cool because I have this history of, wow, isn't it neat and important, and isn't architectural integrity a good thing? I'm like, fuck that, buy new houses. That's, kind of where I'm at, even though now I live in a 1905 house, But the crazy thing is, after my kids were poisoned, we moved into a renovated 1905 house, and because all of our neighbors were sanding and renovating that year, my new baby was also poisoned at a low level, even though I thought I had done everything to protect him. So that was heartbreaking.
So, okay. So, long story short, ladies, make sure to enter to win this great giveaway so that you get this big, huge kit. But if you need a testing kit to test the paint, you can go to ledsafeamerica.org. Is that where they can go?
Yep, Let's Save America, and the top menu bar, it says free test kits, and just fill out the little form, and I will send you a test kit. Just
excellent. So, send away for a test kit, or have someone cool like Tamara come to test everything. And, I mean, and then also before you paint your home, before you do any of those things, check to find out what it is. Check to find out what it is. Before you remodel, check to find out what it is. I think the remodeling, when the kids are young, is going to be, because we've just decided, and Tamara actually told me that it's better for us to just live with the tile, right, than to do anything to it while they're young. So we have decided to live with this ugly green tile for another 10, 15 years until basically the kids are gone, and then my husband and I can leave because I just don't even want to deal with it. And the ironic thing about it, so the tile and the stove is actually dead, like it's broken.
Oh.
And the stove, so there's the countertops, I have to light them now because they're broken. I can't get that redone because it's custom. And so to get one that's the same size as now, they have to cut into that tile. So I'm like, no! So I actually have a broken kitchen that I am just dealing with because I don't even want to take a chance. And so, but honestly, Tamara, if that's the worst thing that I have to deal with, not so bad.
Well, I was remembering for my museum, you gave me two things, I think. Your meat tenderizer and your ice cream scoop. Wasn't that your house?
Yes. Wait, I didn't have a vintage meat tenderizer.
Well, it was like a nutcracker thing or something. It was like a pulverizer.
Yeah.
It tested. My memory's gone. Anyway, I remember I got two.
It was over a year ago, right? And I'm sure you have so many.
Yeah, I have a big collection. My husband's like, "What the heck are you doing with all this stuff in the office? Get it out of here! You're gonna get poisoned." So, yeah, I'm looking into getting a storage unit. And then I want to take this around the country as an exhibit for science museums to show people what things have led.
Oh, that'd be fantastic.
Yeah.
That would be fantastic. Yeah. Well, everyone, I wanted to thank Tamara. Thank you so much for coming on the show tonight. I'm going to give you the final word before we sign off.
Thank you.
So you get the final word right now.
I get the final word. Oh, Jesus. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't know what to say.
Jesus isn't that bad. You said the F word twice. I thought that was funny.
Final word.
She went right over saying Jesus.
Get your kids tested. That's it. Get your kids tested. Watch my documentaries trailer and like us on Facebook at facebook.com/misledmovie because the more we can spread the word and generate a climate of consumer awareness, the more children we're going to be able to protect.
Right. Absolutely. Well, Tamara, thank you so much for coming on, and thank you guys for tuning in and watching all about lead and if it's lurking in your home. I will see you next week, and signing off for Mamavation TV, my name is Leah Segedy. Have a great night.